It always happened at exactly 2:11 a.m., one single knock, slow and deliberate, echoing through the silence like it was measured, practiced, intentional. And for the first week, Daniel Hayes convinced himself it was nothing. Not the wind, not pipes, not an animal, because none of those things knock once and then wait. None of them know when you're awake. Daniel lived alone in a rented townhouse at the edge of a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever happened, and that's exactly why he liked it. The first night, the knock startled him out of sleep, sharp and hollow, coming from somewhere near the front door. He lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, counting seconds that stretched into minutes. No footsteps followed. No second knock. Just silence so thick it rang in his ears. By morning, he laughed it off, blaming stress. But the knock came again the next night. Same time, same single knock, same dead silence afterward. Daniel checked the door, the porch camera, even the street outside. Nothing. No movement. No shadow, no person. By the fifth night, the knock had stopped being surprising and started feeling personal, like a reminder. Like something saying, I'm still here. Daniel began staying awake before 2:11, sitting in bed with his phone clock glowing, breath shallow, waiting. When the knock came, it felt closer than before. Not louder, but heavier, like it carried weight behind it. He noticed something else then, something that made his stomach drop. The knock only happened on nights when he was awake. On the one night he passed out early, there was no knock at all. That was when the fear set in, cold and rational and impossible to ignore. Whatever was knocking wasn't trying to get in. It wasn't announcing itself. It was checking, watching, confirming he was there. And on the 10th night, when 2:11 came and went without a sound, Daniel felt relief for exactly 3 seconds, until he realized something far worse than the knocking itself. Whatever had been outside no longer needed to knock. The silence after the knock stopped was not comforting. It was wrong. Like a sound that should exist had been removed from the world. And Daniel felt it immediately, a pressure settling into the house itself, heavy and watchful. Night 11 came and went without a sound at 2:11 a.m., and Daniel lay awake longer than he ever had, staring at the front door as if it might breathe. By night 12, his routine had unraveled completely. He stopped sleeping normally, setting alarms for 2:05, sitting upright in bed with his phone light dimmed, listening so hard his ears rang. Still, no knock came. Instead, he began noticing other things, subtle things that felt worse. The hallway outside his bedroom felt longer at night, darker than it should be, as though the shadows were pooling there deliberately. His porch camera, which had shown nothing during the knocking nights, now glitched at exactly 2:11, freezing for 3 seconds before resuming like nothing happened. Daniel replayed the footage obsessively, frame by frame, heart pounding, until on the 14th night, he noticed something that made his stomach twist. During the freeze, the timestamp continued counting, but the image did not, as if the camera itself had blinked. Sleep deprivation began to blur reality. He caught himself listening for footsteps that never came, holding his breath for sounds that refused to exist. Then one morning he found something on the inside of his front door 3 shallow, dense at eye level, barely visible unless the light hit them, just right, like knuckles had pressed hard enough to bruise the wood from the other side. Daniel stood there trembling, knowing with certainty that no one had been inside his house, knowing the dents hadn't been there before, knowing something had crossed a boundary without opening a door. That night, at exactly 2:11, his bedroom door creaked open by itself, just an inch, slow and careful, like whatever was outside before no longer needed permission to enter. Daniel didn't move when the bedroom door opened. He couldn't because the fear had settled into him like cement, heavy and absolute pinning into the mattress as he watched the gap widen just enough for darkness to spill across the floor. No footsteps followed, no breath, no shadow crossing the doorway, just the door. standing ajar as if waiting for an invitation that had already been accepted. When dawn finally arrived, Daniel found that the door showed no signs of having been touched. The hinges silent, the frame unmarked, yet the feeling of intrusion clung to him long after daylight washed the room clean. Over the next few days, the house began to change in small but unmistakable ways, as if responding to something unseen moving through it. Lights flickered in rooms he wasn't in. The thermostat adjusted itself down to near-freezing temperatures overnight, and his phone battery drained completely every morning at 2:12 a.m., no matter how fully charged it had been before. Daniel started recording audio on his phone while he slept, desperate to capture proof. And when he played it back, his blood ran cold, not because of a sound, but because of the absence of one. Every night from 2:11 to 2:12, the recording dropped into perfect silence, a dead zone where even the hum of electricity vanished, like the house itself was holding its breath. On the 17th night, Daniel noticed something worse. The knock hadn't stopped, it had moved. At exactly 2:11, a single dull thud echoed from inside the walls behind his bed, followed by the faint creak of pressure releasing, as if something had leaned against the structure from within. He pressed his ear to the wall, pulse racing, and felt a vibration slow, rhythmic, deliberate, matching the cadence of a knuckle, tapping once, then withdrawing. That was when the realization hit him, sharp and nauseating. Whatever had been knocking outside all those nights hadn't disappeared. It had learned the layout of the house, memorized his routines, and found a closer place to stand. And now, it didn't need to knock on the door anymore, because it was already inside. Daniel stopped trying to sleep after that night. Instead, he sat upright against the headboard with the lights on, watching the clock like it was a detonator counting down towards something inevitable. The house no longer felt like a structure. It felt like a body, one that reacted to his movements, groaning softly when he crossed rooms, clicking and settling as though adjusting around him. He started researching the townhouse, digging through old listings, neighborhood forums, and archived news articles, his eyes burning from exhaustion, until he found something that made his hands go cold. A brief report from 8 years earlier about a man who had lived alone in the same unit and vanished without explanation. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. The article mentioned neighbors reporting a strange habit. The man had filed multiple noise complaints, claiming someone knocked on his door once every night at the same time. As the realization settled in, Daniel felt the weight of inevitability press down harder than fear. That night at 2:11 a.m., a knock returned, but not on the door, not on the walls. It came from directly behind him. One single knock, dull and close, as if someone had tapped the headboard with a knuckle that didn't belong to a hand. Daniel spun around, breath tearing from his chest, but there was nothing there, no mark, no movement, only the lingering vibration humming through the wood. His phone buzzed a second later, screen lighting up with a notification he hadn't set. A reminder scheduled years before he moved in, labeled simply, "Don't answer." The timestamp matched the year the previous tenant vanished. Daniel stared at the words, understanding finally that the knocking wasn't random, and it wasn't curiosity, it was ritual. One knock every night, a test of awareness, a line being drawn closer and closer, until the moment the knocking stopped meant something far worse than silence. It meant the door was no longer the boundary. From that night on, Daniel stopped pretending this was something he could survive by ignoring. Fear had evolved into a grim awareness that whatever shared the house with him was no longer content to remain silent. The knocking did not return, but the sense of timing did. Every night at exactly 2:11. Something shifted, like pressure equalizing, like a presence aligning itself with the space around him. Objects moved in subtle ways. Chairs angled slightly toward his bedroom door, the bathroom. Mirror left fogged, as if someone had breathed on it. The TV turning on by itself, to static that pulsed in a slow rhythmic beat, matching the cadence of the original knock. Daniel began speaking aloud at night, voice shaking, asking questions he didn't expect answers to. But on the 22nd night, he received one anyway. At 2:11, his phone lit up without vibrating, displaying a message from an unknown contact composed of a single period, just a dot, perfectly centered, like a silent acknowledgement. His chest tightened as he realized the meaning wasn't in the message itself, but in the timing. It knew when to respond. Panic gave way to desperation, and Daniel typed back, demanding to know what it wanted, why it had come, and the reply arrived slowly, letter by letter, as if being written by something unfamiliar with language. You noticed. The lights dimmed throughout the house, and the low creak rolled through the walls, not like settling wood, but like something shifting its weight. Daniel understood then that the knocking had never been an attempt to enter. It had been a test of attention, a process of selection, and now that he had fully noticed, fully engaged, the rules had changed. That night, as the clock ticked past 2:11 without another sound, Daniel felt a presence settle beside his bed, close enough to feel the mattress depress, close enough to steal his breath, and in the terrible stillness, a thought surfaced that hollowed him out from the inside. Silence was not the end of the ritual. It was the moment just before participation. Daniel did the one thing every warning told him not to do. He acknowledged it, and the moment he whispered, "I know you re-hear," the air in the room changed, thickening like it had weight, pressing against his lungs until each breath felt borrowed. The mattress dipped deeper beside him, slow and deliberate, as though something was settling in carefully, learning the shape of his body through the bed. His phone screen flickered on without touch, displaying the time to 11 a.m., then dimmed again, over and over, like a pulse. From the hallway came the sound of movement, not footsteps, but a dragging pressure, as if something without legs was shifting its mass across the floor, testing limits it no longer respected. Daniel's ears rang as a whisper formed, not in the air, but inside his head, layered and wrong, repeating a single phrase with patient insistence. You waited. Memories that weren't his began to surface, brief flashes of other rooms, other beds, other people lying awake at the same hour, listening to the same knock, all of them frozen in fear just like he was now. He realized then that the entity wasn't tied to the house. The house was only a container, a temporary vessel used until awareness was achieved. The knocking had been a signal, a beacon meant to identify those who listened instead of sleeping, those whose fear sharpened into attention. The pressure beside him rose, as though whatever was there was standing now, towering close enough that he could feel cold radiating from where its form should have been. The whisper returned, clearer this time, almost gentle. It's your turn. At that moment, the realization struck with devastating clarity. He was no longer the one being watched. He was being prepared. Somewhere outside, far beyond the walls, another door would soon receive its first knock, and Daniel understood, in the final instant before the lights went out completely, that the ritual didn't end when the knocking stopped. It ended when someone new began listening. Tonight, when your house goes quiet and the clock slips past 2:11, listen carefully. If you hear a single knock and then nothing at all, don't feel relieved. That silence doesn't mean it left. It means it found someone who listens. And if the knocking ever stops for you, ask yourself why.